Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of our financial aid series. Here, we're going to talk about ways to make college more affordable and easier on your wallet. So, we'll talk about things like scholarships, financial aid, loans, tax credits, and so much more. All so that your kids can go to really great colleges without financial stress. So, look, if paying for college is in your future, stay tuned right here for money saving tips that you're not going to get from Google, from high school counselors, and certainly not from colleges themselves. Hey, if we haven't met, my name is Roman Polnar. I'm a financial aid expert and your host for these financial aid series. And today I want to teach you how to avoid these three-step emotional roller coaster that parents go through in their kids' senior year of high school. And the reason it's so important is because that emotional roller coaster comes at a very high price. And not just emotionally. Like, of course, there is a price to your sanity. Stress is expensive. But I'm also talking about the actual cost, the hard dollars that you're actually going to spend on college. Because families that go through this roller coaster will always pay more for college than families who don't. See, I've been advising and working with families on college financial planning for the last 20 years. And I've seen a very consistent pattern develop over those years. Families who go through this three-stage roller coaster always end up paying more out of their pocket, while those families who don't go through this roller coaster pay less for the exact same schools for the exact same experience. And the fact of the matter is, everybody pays something very different for the same thing. So think for a moment when you went to college. Think about some of your closest friends from college. Remember? It doesn't matter if you thought about 3 people, 10, or 30. I can tell you without a doubt that every one of you paid something very different for the same exact experience. So, look, if you have a college bound high school freshman, a sophomore, or a junior, and if you want to send them to really great colleges where they will end up paying less than all of their friends, then this is the episode you want to listen to. All right, so let's shift gears. And let me tell you what happens every single spring when high school seniors start getting their acceptance letters. There are a lot of emotions in the house at that time, right? There's the anticipation, there's the excitement, the worry, the anxiety, the waiting. There's a lot. So imagine that by the time seniors start getting their acceptance letters, the feeling of relief is overwhelming. Even if kids don't get into their first choice schools, there's a little bit of heartbreak, but even getting into their second or third or even fourth choice colleges still feels good. It's a relief. They got in somewhere and now the path is clear. And everybody in the house starts to feel lighter again, at least until about 2 weeks later. Without fail, when financial aid letters arrive, parents are confronted with the actual cost of their kids' college. And that sort of dreaded feeling that they always had in the back of their mind or in the back of that, internal gut feeling of finally being confronted face to face with the fact that someone has to now pay for all of it. And a realization that that person is you. And the time is now. And that gets pretty rough for a lot of families because a lot of families realize in that very moment that colleges are not giving them as much financial aid as they had hoped. And so now they're getting stuck with a much bigger bill than they could afford. So that stress, the financial stress, right? The financial worry becomes pretty great at that point. So they call their friends, they Google, they post questions on college boards, and eventually a lot of them will call a professional for help. So when I get these calls every single March, like without fail, the biggest question parents ask is, how do we get more money to pay this bill? Like, colleges are not giving us as much money. We've saved what we've saved. There's a gap. Where do we find the money? Well, unfortunately, when they realize that there's very little they can do in that 11th hour, other than maybe borrow, they sort of slump in their chairs. And I can see it, right? We used to meet with people face to face. Nowadays, it's all on Zoom, but I can just see their shoulders sort of slump. They look down on the floor and they kind of that feeling of defeat and they say, how did we get here? Seemingly it was just yesterday. Their kids were little. There was all this time that they could plan and save and invest and prepare and then blink. Their kids are in high school. Life is busy. Things are moving fast. Then blink, their kids got into college. Mom and dad look around and they realize they haven't saved up enough for college. But the college bill needs to be paid. Blink and it's right in front of them. So, they do the best they can, but ultimately a lot of them end up loading up on student loans, parent loans, and they dig into their retirement and other savings just to get their kids through college. And when their kids graduate, looking back, they realize that they paid way more for college than they should have, more than a lot of their friends who paid less for the same experience. And that's a real big bummer. And it means that a lot of kids, as well as their parents, will have years of paying back those loans and effectively still suffering the consequences of having overpaid for college. So that's the bad side of things. Let me now share the better side of things because there's a not so magic trick to paying less for really, really great colleges and giving your kids an awesome experience without having to be in that position when you sit back, slump in your chairs, and say, how did we get here? Because those families who end up overpaying for college got there because they let their emotions drive the entire process. They let their emotion drive the bus. And I know it kind of seems, maybe a little bit weird that we talk about emotions, but I promise you, these emotions that I'm going to tell you about right now, there's three of them. Consistently without fail, lead every family that falls sort of victim to these emotions without fail every single time these families pay more for college than they should. So I want you to remember this acronym G.O.T. because this is how all these families got stuck. They got stuck paying more for college than they should have. They got stuck with much bigger bills and they just got stuck on this emotional roller coaster. So let me break it down because this is really, really important. The first feeling that I think a lot of us experience, especially around our kids getting into college, is guilt. Some parents, they feel guilt because they worked a lot, they weren't home, it was about time, about not being there, and they feel guilty, and they want to give their kids the best experience that the kids want, that money can buy. It's a feeling of guilt of not having given them enough, and so now this is what they want to give their kids. For some, it's about money. They feel guilty that they weren't able to save as much as they needed to save, or they weren't able to earn as much and just pay for college out of pocket without missing it. And so this internal feeling of guilt drives parents to say, go wherever will make you happy. And for some, the guilt comes from just not knowing. When I went to school, we were first generation immigrants. My parents were so busy working, they didn't have time to go to all these college fairs and learn about the system because they never went through the system. They've never gone through it. They had no idea what it was like. And gosh, I didn't blame them then. I still don't blame them, but I can imagine how they felt. And I know this is how a lot of families, first generation families, feel as well. They feel guilty about not knowing. So they say, hey, kids, you just go and pick whatever colleges you want. Whatever colleges will make you happy. Whatever colleges will give you a head start. Whatever college will make you have a better life. But it's a trap because that sense of guilt never results in a good outcome. It's kind of like telling a 16-year-old who just got their driver's license to go test drive whatever car they want, whatever car makes them happy. Deep inside, hoping that they're going to pick a reasonable and affordable car, like a safe, reliable, affordable car, but not telling them to stay out of the Mercedes dealership or stay out of the Porsche dealership and stay out of the Ferrari dealership. And that's what happens. You let a 16-year-old or a 17 or an 18-year-old the freedom to say, go find your happiness in the car or in the college. Chances are they might end up going for that bright red, shiny one, then is probably not the best fit for them. So when kids end up picking colleges that are not a good financial aid fit for them, and they apply and eventually get accepted, you know what parents feel? They feel a great deal of overwhelm because they realize in that moment, like, holy crap, our kids worked really, really hard. They got into these schools. These schools are not right for us, but what am I going to do? Like, I got to figure out a way to pay for it. And that's exactly where that panic, that overwhelm in the springtime comes. That's when they start reaching out to their friends, to, online or to us and say, hey, we need more money. Right. And so sometimes we're able to help because maybe they made a mistake on their financial aid forms. Maybe they didn't do something obvious that we can file a financial aid appeal and get them a little bit more money. But in most cases, the people who experience kind of the most amount of guilt and said, pick whatever college you want. And in that final 1 or 2 months before their kids have to make a final decision of which college they're going to select and attend in the fall, which, by the way, is May 1st in their senior year, which is coming up in just a few days. So there are literally millions of families right now scrambling to figure out how the hell they're going to pay for college that they don't have enough money for. And so this is where that feeling of overwhelm makes them, unfortunately, make some pretty bad financial decisions. In most cases, it means they're going to load themselves up with debt or their kids with debt, or they're just going to start, decimating their savings, their retirement, pulling money out of equity, whatever it takes just to get their kids into and then through the next 4 years of college. Well, the reason they feel that is the third trap, and that's feeling trapped. That's that emotional roller coaster. They feel guilty, then they feel overwhelmed because they didn't, make all the right kind of decisions leading up to that point because they felt guilty. Then they feel overwhelmed by all these decisions they have to make, and then they feel trapped because May 1st is just around the corner. They can't tell their kids, like, don't go to college, you know? And so unless their kids applied to a variety of schools and some of them actually gave them enough money, even if it's not their top one, two, three, four choice, they still end up oftentimes feeling trapped and figuring out a way to send their kids to an expensive school they can't afford just because they can't see a better alternative. Well, there is a better alternative. And, these families got stuck because of those three really important emotions that they let get in the way. But you don't have to. So if you still have a college bound freshman, sophomore, or a junior, especially if they're a junior, pay attention because this is the time that they're going to be picking their colleges. This is the time when you're going to say, hey, kid, go test drive cars. And it's really important to be involved in that process. So the first thing that you can do to avoid letting guilt take over and then letting overwhelm and feeling trapped, take hold is get involved in picking their colleges, just like you would if you were to tell them to go test drive a car. So what does that mean? Well, it's really important for you to know how much money you have to actually pay for college. And there's no shame in whatever amount that is. It might be very little, it might be some, it might be more than others. It doesn't matter. It's all very personal and very subjective. So don't be so hard on yourself. Like all of us, no matter how well we've done, every single person looks back over their shoulder and secretly wishes they could have done more. Like Unavoidable, human nature. We always want more. So just give yourself a break, give yourself some grace, and just wherever you are, that is where you are. Accept it. But the question is, where are you? How much money do you really have to pay for college? So take out a piece of paper, write it down. Think about your savings, think about the income that you're going to be willing and able to contribute for college. Like that's your budget. And you need that before your kids can go pick the right colleges. The second thing you need is to know your financial aid target, meaning if college costs you X and you've got Y, what's that gap? What's the difference? And then you got to figure out where that money can come from. So, what kind of financial aid should you be looking for? Are you a family that will qualify for traditional need based financial aid? Or are you a higher income family that's not going to qualify for need based financial aid? Well, that's okay. If you're that family, if you're a middle income family, it doesn't mean it's game over. You get nothing. You're just going to have to borrow for it. There's so much money out there. You can go to colleges that have merit based scholarships. There's a lot of them, there's millions of dollars. Or you might look at outside scholarships that have nothing to do with colleges. They're foundations, you know, corporations, families that have endowment money set aside for kids that have a specific profile. There's a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars every year. And maybe you're a family that can get some tax savings and tax credits. I mean, the government literally has a $10,000 tax scholarship for families that qualify. It's just an income qualification, and you just have to check a box on your tax return. And so many families miss it because they just don't know that it's there. So, again, knowing what you're aiming for ahead of time can make you or help you make much, much, much better decisions. And that's how you get involved in helping your kids pick the right colleges. Look, colleges give money in very, very different ways. Some colleges give a lot of money to families that have a financial need. Some colleges give a lot of money forget financial need, just to kids that are a good fit. They don't have to be valedictorians. They don't have to be the star quarterback. They don't have to be the number one, volunteer in their community. They just have to have the right kind of set of characteristics. And that's what colleges are looking for. So if you find colleges that have money looking for the kid with your student's profile, that is a really good fit. So you kind of have to know what you're aiming for ahead of time and then pick colleges that will actually satisfy that target, that will give you that money. And if you can find 3, 4, 5, 10 those perfect fit colleges for your child and for you financially, it doesn't matter where they get in because all of those options would be great. And if you get accepted or your child gets accepted to multiple of those schools, well, now you've got even the best situation you can think of because you've got leverage. You can go to school 1 or school 2 or school 5 and say, hey, can you help us with more? Because some of these colleges that gave you more, you can use them as leverage to say, well, listen, we've got a phenomenal offer. Can you bring yours up as well? All of this can happen if you've done your pre-work, which is knowing what you're aiming for. And then have the money talk with your child. It's not very hard. Yeah, I mean, it sucks. For one, you're talking about money. That's never fun. Usually never fun. Usually not fun. But secondly, you're talking about money, with your teenager by saying, hey, we kind of have some barriers that we kind of have to stay within, these lane markers. Let's stay within this roadway. Let's just not go completely off the rails. So a lot of parents dread having that conversation. And guess what? It's that guilt that I just talked about. They feel guilty. Your heart just kind of goes, oh, I can't bear having that conversation with my child. I can't bear tell them that I can't do something for them. False thinking. Guilt has nothing to do with this. You might feel guilty. I won't take that away from you, but it should not have any part in your college decisions because I promise you, there's such amazing schools that will give your kids a lot of money. All you have to do is just pick the right college. So it's important to have the money talk so your kids at least know what they should be aiming for. It's not about the price of college. It's not the sticker price that's going to determine how much you pay for it. It's all about how much financial aid, merit aid, scholarships, tax credits you're going to collect to lower this sticker price so that you can end up paying out of pocket what you can actually afford comfortably without going into debt. And I can promise you, there's every single family, regardless of what your circumstances are, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of what your savings are, none of this should stand in the way of you being able to get all that money. You just have to apply to the right schools that have the money for your specific family, for your specific student. It's there. You just have to put in a little time before your kids actually apply so you can choose those right colleges. And I promise you, by the time spring of your kids' senior year comes around, and you start getting those financial aid award letters, you're not going to feel overwhelmed and you're not going to feel trapped and you're not going to have to call me to say, what do we do now? All right. So have the money talk. And last but not least, number four, apply for the right type of financial aid. Apply correctly and apply on time. I can't tell you how many families come to us again in the spring of their kids' senior year to say, we thought we did everything right. Like we've been following you for, years or months and like we picked the right colleges, we did everything right. Why aren't we getting the money? And so we'll go back and usually audit and review the financial aid forms because 9 times out of 10 that's where they made the mistake. And 9 times out of 10 we discovered that either they didn't submit the information correctly or sometimes they didn't even submit because they put all the data in but they didn't hit the right button. Something as silly as that. Sometimes it's a different mistake, like they put a different or an extra digit, and all of a sudden their expected family contribution is through the roof, or they over-reported something that they didn't have to report on those financial aid forms. Almost always it's a small, innocent mistake that ends up having these huge consequences. So if you're going to apply, and everybody should apply, even if you don't think you're going to qualify for need-based financial aid, apply anyways, because a lot of colleges will not even consider your student for merit scholarships unless you submitted your financial aid forms because they don't know. Maybe, if you don't submit the forms, they could think, well, this family is willing to pay the full sticker price. They're going to be what we call the full pay family. Hey, colleges don't mind. In fact, that's what they want. If they can get every single incoming freshman family to pay 100% of the published sticker price, oh man, that'd be so happy. But they know that that's not going to happen. They know that families need money, they need help because I mean, hell, we all know colleges are incredibly outrageously expensive. Like we're all feeling this crazy inflation at the gas pump in the grocery store, but colleges have been going up at this 7-8% rate for the last 20 years. So whatever you're experiencing now, like gas used to be $3, then it was like all of a sudden 4, 5, $6 now. Colleges have been doing this for the last 20 years. That's why it's now, $250,000, $300,000 to send kids to a private school. Wasn't always like that. Wasn't like that when you and I went to school, but that's what it is now. So apply always. Doesn't matter whether you think you're going to qualify, you just have to apply. And you got to apply correctly and you got to apply on time. You open up yourself or you open up opportunities for yourself to actually get a lot of different kind of financial aid. So folks, really quick recap. Families get stuck with much bigger college bills because they fell into these traps. Because of guilt, they don't get involved. They don't set parameters for their kids. They don't talk about money. They don't get involved as early as they should. And then it leads to overwhelm when they have to make really, really big, really important financial decisions on a super, super tight schedule. And you all know haste makes waste. Unless you plan in advance, it's easy to make mistakes. It's easy to become victim to a short deadline and miss something very important. And that's why parents and families feel trapped. They feel trapped because the bill is due, the timeline or the deadline is right there in front of them, and they have to make a decision. Do we send our kids to college or not? And of course, most families will say, yes, we'll do whatever it takes at our own expense, often at our kids' expense of their future well being, but we're going to do this. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do for those families who are really up against the wall. But all of you watching this, you've got, or listening to this, you all have the benefit of time. So prepare, get involved with your kids in picking good colleges. A good college needs to be a good fit for them academically, experientially. Where will they have a great experience? Where will they get a great degree? But let's focus and highlight degree, because at the end of the day, that's why kids go to college. They need a degree so that they can start in life and get a job or start a career, right? That's why they go to college. So be mindful of that degree. But it's also a place that they can graduate, in 4 years. Because if they take 5 or 6 years to graduate, well, heck, that's a lot more money. And then it has to be a good fit for you financially. So be involved in picking colleges together. Know what kind of financial aid you're aiming for. Have a plan. If you've saved, half of what you need, that's okay. You just got to figure out where the difference is going to come from. So do your research and then look for colleges that will give you that money. And then have that money talk. Don't be embarrassed and don't shy away from it. It's important. And it's also going to teach your kids to make really sound financial decisions, because this is the first really, really big financial decision that they're going to make that will have an impact on the rest of their life. And if you teach them how to make the right decision, chances of them making good financial decisions later in life are a lot better than if you teach them to make the wrong financial decision. And oftentimes, the lesson that we teach our kids is not an actual sort of intentional lesson. They just learn it because it's a byproduct. And so we don't want to set our kids up for failure. And I know that you don't either. So do the hard work now. It will pay off for the rest of their life. And then apply. Apply in the right way, apply on time, and apply correctly. Don't make mistakes. And I promise that your outcome will be far better than everybody else. So, if you have any questions, for those of you who are tuning in live, feel free to ask in the comments below. You can also go to our website. It's pillar6college.com. There's a lot of great information. You can also sign up for our newsletter. I send out almost daily emails with financial aid tips for families whose kids are still early on in the journey, all the way to those high school senior families who are negotiating for more financial aid in that final few days, which is technically right now. I'm recording this. It is April 27th. In about 3 days, millions of families around the country are going to make that final decision and commit to that one school. So wherever you are in that process, feel free to sign up. It's a really informative, short series of emails with tips that you can use right now. And if you're in need of help in picking the right colleges and having the money conversation, in filling out the financial aid forms or negotiating with colleges, there's always a link for you to book a time and talk to me one-on-one. So without further ado, I'm not going to keep you any longer than I have to. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I wish you all the very, very best. And I'll talk to you all again very soon. Till then, all my best. Take care. Talk to you soon.